SQOLOGY Podcast. Many thanks to ResoNix Sound Solutions for making this podcast a reality. There's a link in the show notes, but you can find out more about ResoNix Sound Treatments, along with tons of other info, resources, and products at ResoNixSoundSolutions.com. Now on with the show. Welcome to the SQOLOGY Podcast. Today we are joined again by Miguel Rios. Hello, Miguel.
Hello, Mr. Clifton. How's life?
Good. Welcome back. So we're
appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Leading up very closely here to Steel Valley Regionals, and we had before Aggieland, we kind of had a discussion on here about some of the preparation that people can do before big shows. That especially people who aren't accustomed to doing these kinds of things, but also with Miguel, as we discussed previously, with his efforts in doing on-the-road tuning at a professional level and everything, he has obviously over time run into a lot of scenarios where a lot of people do different things with their systems and setups, and in some cases he might be able to launch off that. In other cases he might have to undo some of that or troubleshoot or those kinds of things, which obviously doesn't help his job.
Yep.
But also something that you don't really want to happen in the lanes when you're competing at that level either, because as we all know, especially with the invitational rounds, for example, it's pretty much a steamroller coming through that, whether you're ready or not, it's going. But anyway, I guess first of all, I guess it's been a minute since we last discussed this on here. Maybe half a year.
Like I think it was January or February. I came by.
It was cold. I remember that. It was cold.
Yes, it was.
So, how's the gig going? Are you still enjoying it? You still staying busy with that on the road, or how's things going?
Yeah. So everything's going good. Done a lot of cars. Some I don't post, some I do post. Not trying to be that annoying squeaky wheel that every single time I do a car, I'm always posting. So
right.
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But it's been good. It's been good. Trying to possibly transition to doing boats as well. Given that I'm in Tampa.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I don't have much experience in boats. So I'm probably gonna do some free labor, ask people around me that have had experience tuning boats and just learn it. Until I believe I'm proficient at something, I don't charge anyone. It's just gonna be more of like hey, this is a fun hobby thing. Let me see what else I can expand on.
Right.
Will from OTS Audio, I reached out to him a few days ago. I'm like, hey dude, you do some home stuff. Can I join you? Just learn. And it seems like we might be able to collaborate there. So just trying to branch out. I know John Centers beforehand, he flew me out to, help me learn some more of the home theater stuff. And he let me tune his $500,000 room, which that was a really cool experience, just being able to do that. Very humbling to see, other people reach out to me like, hey dude, I'm willing to help you. And it feels really good to have people help me out.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've, if I recall correctly, you've also done some tuning on other people who tune cars for a living as well, like Steve Cook and such. So what was that experience like?
Yeah, it was great being able to collaborate. I will never ever say that I'm the end all be all tuner or anything like that. I'm just a tuner in the world of many greats like Brian Mitchell, Jeff Smith, Steve Cook, and the list goes on. Those are OG guys that have been doing this for, I don't know, maybe even longer than I've been alive.
Right.
So, that's something that whenever I get the opportunity to let's go off with Steve Cook, where I was able to meet him and I was like, hey dude, here's my car. You've done this for ever. What do you think? And it was really reassuring when he heard it. He's like, dude, this thing's awesome. Can we do this to my Cadillac? I was like, sure, let's roll.
Heck yeah.
Let's have fun, and then also being able to collaborate, having both minds, because he has experience and stuff that I can learn and put in my arsenal and vice versa. And that's why the post is blending new school and old school. It was more of just hey, I'm doing the RTA and the phase and the time alignment and the by ear stuff. And hey, let's throw another person in there. What do they think? What else can they add?
Right.
I heard that was a big thing that used to be done in the past, was with like the teams. They would have multiple people getting in the cars and having these multiple opinions.
For sure. Yeah.
And I feel like nowadays it doesn't happen that much. Yeah, I feel like that doesn't happen that much, at least not with me. With my car, it's mainly me and Bree, and it's pretty much just Bree and I.
Right.
So at SVR, like that car is pretty much just me.
No, that's really cool. What vehicles have stood out to you in your own opinion of what you've done? I guess maybe not necessarily the final result as much as something that just came together that you weren't, that was like, oh, that worked out well and it sounds great and here we are, we're done.
Yeah. One of those that really sounded phenomenal. Of course, Steve Cook's Cadillac turned out great.
Right.
And a lot of others, but one that I really want to shout out to is Ian Brandon Stinger. He hired me and I flew up to him, and it was cold. Everyone always wants to travel north. No one wants to come, Georgia, Florida. Nope. Everyone always wants to be north. I'm like, okay.
We're going to the cold states.
Like, let's do it. And one of the things that, Miguel's personal opinion is, and my old build had it and I changed it, and that is 8-pillar mid-ranges kind of stuck on the dash.
Right.
Where now you're having reflections from not only, the whole car, but the windshield and the window and now the dash as well. And you can see that clear as day with the RTA. We have all the cone filtering in the mid-range, which is, in my opinion, collapses your stage. But then on top of that, you see that in the phase response and in the impulse response. It's just like so many reflections. And when he showed me what he did, and of course he had him in the 8 pillars, I'm like, hey dude, like it might not turn out the way you expect. Because beforehand you used to have an Audi, and he had those in the dash facing up towards the windshield, which is a great location. Now you're taking that reflection and using it to your advantage versus disadvantage. Mm-hmm. And I was like, but, let's see what we can do. Well, luckily he did have his mid-range a little bit higher off the dash and a little more forward. So it wasn't really reflecting off the dash as much as, like, let's say my old build was when it was like really on the dash. And it turned out great. Good impact, great solid car, good imaging, great depth. He really liked it. I really liked it. And I was like, you know what? Every car is different, So it's cool seeing when things in my head, I'm like, man, that might not work out the best. Always, have expectation management, but it's cool when it turns out to go better. And it wasn't like your van where I was in there. I was like, why is this thing? Why is it on the other side?
What is this torture, terror?
I was like, yep, well, I'm just going to have to throw the RTA out of this. But here it is.
Just gonna go from scratch, go old school.
Clifton, that was a day. Because I was in there. I was like, okay, the Mac says this. I'm like, okay, cool. And I never just go off what the microphone says.
Right.
I was like, that's why I do it in person. So I'm like, I hop in and I was like, yeah, this does not sound the way that RTA looks.
These things do not look the same.
That
concerns me when and maybe it's because of my own experience with my own vehicles as well, because they're a little bit more outrageous. But when somebody's like, well, I had to undo what somebody else did, on their tune or something, and it's like, well, I mean, just because the RTA says something doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong in terms of what actual in performance is. Obviously, you have to have it when you're tuning, and I'm saying this is an assumption, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, you're always going to kind of go to that baseline, which is the whole point of using the tools in the first place, exactly. Right? So you kind of go to a known point that you can visualize and that you understand to be a cohesive point, in theory, as you go through and tune any vehicle. But that doesn't mean that that's where it's going to land, or that you're going to or that mathematical correction or mathematical perfection equals what you're after for results audibly. Yeah.
Exactly. And, over the years and now with WaveForm, over the months that I've been tuning, I mean, cars from every direction, from crazy builds like Steve Cook's and Evan Perez's Toyota that, Steve built, that has unlimited amount of money in it, to very simple budget builds. And sometimes, you have to, it was hard for me to kind of slow down and be like, okay, not every car is going to be that 10 out of 10. It can't be. It's impossible.
Right.
And sometimes, my own OCD and ADHD to a fault, I'm like, man, like I want it to give me a little more. And in the beginning, like I would just stay there for like hours, just trying to massage it. Like, come on, give it to me. And it just wouldn't. And that's okay, and a lot of people, the customers, they're from the very beginning, they're like, dude, this thing's phenomenal. It's awesome. It's what I want. I'm like, cool. But I wasn't happy, and that's kind of to my own fault. But I've kind of learned, to kind of dial that down and understand now with a different system. Okay, like what does it have in it? How's the system designed? How's the sound deadening? What can this car even get to from the beginning? And then go from there. If the car, for instance, like your van, like your van can never be this like, SPL crazy monster up front because, I mean, you have one sub for a mid bass. And It's like, there's going to be those limitations. Now you're 18, let's crank it. Let's have some fun.
Right.
But like, there was this Kia Forte I did and he had 8-inch for subs. I think he had 3 of them in a small box. And the judge was like, yeah, this is an Ohio night tune. He was like, yeah, it needed a little bit more low end. And I'm like, yeah, dude, it has an 8-inch. Like, it's not going to give you. You can't.
There's a limitation on the system that I can't tune around. So you're going to have to take what you get.
Exactly, and it's like that's kind of a thing that at least I want to tell a lot of people out there. It's like it's okay to not always have the best scoring system. Just enjoy it for yourself. I've always said this from the beginning. I was like, I personally don't care for competition, or to not care, but I don't care for it. Like, it's like, let's just have fun. And if a judge likes it, awesome. That's even better. But if he doesn't, or she doesn't, it's still your car. Just enjoy it. If you're happy, I'm happy.
Right. Or at least know where your limitations are when comparing to the bunch. Like,
exactly.
You have to know who's around you in that. And I think that's where the invitational rounds, where everybody's kind of lumped together by multiple judges, the same judges that judged every other car, it gives you the ability to kind of see it. It does both, right? I think it removes the limitations of categories where it shows that the best cars are going to rise to the top regardless of the arbitrary limitations that we put on them through a rule book.
Yeah.
Because, who knows what's going to happen at SVR, but, Aggieland, the majority, regardless of category, all of the top cars were in the top 15.
Yeah.
It didn't matter what their system limitations were. And, but also when you are consistently comparing yourself vehicles around, there is going to be some of those, system complexities or, how far somebody's taken something or iterated it or whatever. I mean, all those things add up into one cohesive thing that you can kind of see, okay, well, I'm kind of consistently this part of the pack. What do I need to do to get better and who's around me and that those things all add up. But yeah, I mean, it's not a matter of, well, I didn't win everything, so therefore my car is worth nothing. That's not appropriate at all.
Yeah. And unfortunately, some of the customers that I've had, they have felt that way where it's like, hey dude, like, I do good in like the orgs, I'm moving money around, like I'm not top 10. I'm like, dude, unfortunately, unless you go to a smaller show, when you go to these bigger shows, I mean, we got cars that have full dash builds, and
you're going up against the best in the world. I mean,
exactly, and we're talking about people that have been doing this for years with, professional tuners that have been doing this for, once again, like even longer than I've been alive. That knows the ins and outs, that knows the different judges, that can make different presets for each different judge and org. I'm like, this is at the end of the day a competition that you're going
Right.
to.
Right.
And the more information, because, knowledge is key, that you have, the more you can play, quote unquote, the game. That doesn't mean your car doesn't sound good. It's just they have more information that you don't have. And that's okay. And another thing, Clifton, and please, chime in. But one thing I noticed at least on the internet, is sometimes less is more.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen a lot of people do, and personally, like I haven't experienced this in customers, but I've seen some crazy builds. And I'm like, man, like, why are you putting 4 different tweeters? I'm exaggerating, but it's like, right. Guys, sometimes less is more. Like, we don't need to go above and beyond every time. I've seen some wicked builds. I mean, John, I forget his last name, Cosby.
Yeah.
I mean, his system isn't nothing elaborate.
Right.
It's not a full dashboard, and he took the invitational at Aggie.
Right.
It's just like, hey guys, like, sometimes you don't have to always follow what the internet says to, win. Sometimes it's just good system design, understanding your vehicle, and then having a good tuner, whomever that is. I mean, John had some phenomenal tuners behind that car to include himself, Dr. Winker, Mark Eldridge, I think Scott Williams as well, and whomever else. It's like, those are some big, heavy names behind that car.
Right.
So, just want to shout that out there for anyone who's thinking about, building a car. You don't have to start, cutting big holes in your car instantly. Like, especially if you have a newer car, a lot of OEM systems design is actually pretty well thought out. And a lot of times using those OEM factory locations, just modifying them a little bit to, improve on them, probably be better than, whatever the internet tells you.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely agree with that. Yeah, because without doing a fair amount of testing, and you're always going to have compromise, right? Like, okay, you fix this problem, but you're going to have another. You can obviously, like you mentioned before, limiting reflections, limiting some of that comb filtering that you're having to correct down the road. A lot of those things, can add up to a more cohesive presentation. On the flip side, sometimes, when you get things ultra dialed in, it can be not as easy to listen to just going down the road.
Exactly. Yeah.
you start getting to where you got to be locked into the perfect position, and I got to sit just this way and have my head locked in. It's like, hey, sometimes
so you gotta
some of those
lean back. Yeah.
Sometimes some of those imperfections are what makes it easier to just listen to and drive. So,
man, you're so spot on, Clifton. Exactly. And, so for instance, my car, gray, I only have one tune for several reasons. One, kind of like my revels at home, my reference. I'm not switching presets, whatever song I listen to. I mean, it's the same thing. If it's tuned well and it's designed well, in my opinion, you don't have to be switching tunes or dealing with the tone control knob every 30 seconds.
For sure.
To me, that kind of takes away from the music. Like, I kind of just want to enjoy it.
Right. Not
be fiddling with some knobs every single time I just want to listen to a song.
Absolutely.
And when a song is not recorded well, a good system will show that. And that's okay. And sometimes being able to have a quick reference like headphones or, a system at home that is dialed in well from engineers. I'm like, hey, is the song bad or is it my car?
Right.
That's an easy way to quickly just A and B. If it's a bad recording, well, either just live with the bad recording or don't listen to the song. Right. There's a lot of songs I don't listen to because they just don't sound good in my car or my revels or anything. So it's like, well, it's what it is. But I don't know, Clifton. I feel like there's a lot of misinformation on the internet that I see a lot. And I see a lot of people spending so much money on like the wrong thing. It's
like what do you?
So, again, this is all Miguel's opinion, not WaveForm. I know this is all Miguel. I think a lot of people spend time on, hey, how pretty can we make this look so we can take a picture? Versus, hey, how can we make this system sound good and still keep the functionality of the car? Because you can do both. Mm-hmm. And my car that's the whole build around gray, is to be a testament to that. is to be able to still be a daily driver. I don't have no kick panels. I can stretch my legs out. There's a cover in the back. Whoever sees me when I show up there Thursday, that trunk is going to be packed to the gills. It's still a daily driver. I drive it every single day. But for instance, let's say you want to build a really good system, right? The first thing I'm going to do is, hey, let's start with what your goals are. If you want to get really, really loud, okay, well, maybe let's not get an amp that only puts out 60 watts, right? Like, let's start with that. What are your goals?
It's Class A and costs $23,000. It should sound better.
Exactly. You see, that's my point exactly. And once again, Miguel's opinion, I don't think you need Class A or AB or anything. I mean,
I agree completely. Yeah.
And a lot of the top guys, let's just name one, Robert Boyd. I mean, this man always wins. What's he running? Arc Audio X2 is Class C. I have Class D. I know Austin McCarter. Sorry if I butcher your name, bro. But he's running the same ARC series. I don't know how many competitors running ARC series amp. Great amps. I think the notion that you need Class AB to have good sound, I think that needs to go out the window.
And I mean, I think for the most part, it has. It's not nearly like it used to be where it was just you couldn't. But I mean, the NASCAR has been competing for how long with Class D amps? I mean,
exactly.
Scott's G35 that was before I got it. It was running Class D amps. I mean,
yeah.
And it was running 751s. They were subwoofer amps basically.
Yeah.
They were running full range. But I mean, I don't, and like I said, even back then, I mean, again, and being at the, brand level, obviously, I deal with a lot of customer contacts and things like that. And I would, 10 years ago, I would say that a solid, unless it was a specific product question, like, what the specifications of this driver or the, questions like that. Mm-hmm. But as far as like, we get a lot of general car audio questions, not just specific to the product. And I would say 10 years ago, 85 to 90% of those questions were amp related.
Yeah.
And part of that was because we didn't, especially back then, we didn't have our own amplifier. So people were asking what, amplifiers to put with our speakers.
Go with. Yeah.
For whatever reason, people think it's like food and wine where you have to pair the two.
You have to pair them, yeah. I see that too. I feel like Go ahead. I'm sorry, Clifton.
No, you're fine. Which I think comes over from home audio, which, I mean, to a certain degree, I understand, some of home audio, I kind of get it because people are like, well, I've got these, these horn-loaded speakers and the thing is rated at, 98 dB, sensitivity. And so I want to run this 3-watt, tube amplifier. So, it's one of those things where there's a lot more of that. And even, I would say 15, 20 years ago plus, as far as making sure that you had the power on tap for the subwoofer that you were driving and, all that was aligned, then, you could figure those things out. But now, I mean, and power is so cheap now.
Power's so cheap. Yeah.
You look at, who's Orion coming, recently coming back with their old school amplifier, and everybody likes the Facebook post and everything, but you actually go to the website and look at the amplifier. It's like a 2x50 at 4 ohm stereo for like $2,200. I think it is.
Yeah, that's up there.
You know what I mean? Like, I think people forget how much power cost back in the day to do those things, that where we've come technology wise and manufacturing wise, and with the global economy we're in with making stuff in China, let's face it.
And of course,
it's one of those things where the whole idea of old school power made in America is a looking, hindsight 2020 thought process, I think.
Yeah.
Because not only are we talking, and I'm looking up to make sure I'm telling you right, but not only are we talking a amplifier. Okay, it's here. Yeah, it's a dual monoblock amplifier. Ships in August. Let's see here. And I'm not linked to these people at all. This is not, this has nothing to do with
this is not an affiliate link.
Not an affiliate link. So yeah, the pre-order right now is $21.99.95. And specifications are 50 watts by 2 at 4 ohms, 200 by 1 at 4 ohms, and 400 by 1 at 2 ohms. Of course, the specs are great. Big deal. And
but now almost everything's great.
Right. And it's 22 inches long. I mean, it's almost 2 feet long by time. I mean, it will be 2 foot long by the time you plug everything in. So, it's like, who's giving up the space, the heat that it's going to, have involved
on that.
Yeah, for 100 watts. And you figure that everybody's running active now. Back in the day, you could run a system off of, if you're running, say, 100 watts at 2 ohms stereo or whatever, and you were running multiple speakers off the same amp with passive networks and everything else, like you could kind of cheat the system. But now you figure, I would assume that the majority of systems you do are 3-way up front, right?
Yeah. I don't think I've even done a 2-way yet. No.
Yeah. So if you look at just your front stage to use these amplifiers, you're looking at $6,600.
Yep.
For 50 watts per channel. That is not going to, really to do it right, you would need 2 for your mid bass.
Yep.
And you might be able to get away with 1 for your mid-range and 1 for your tweeters. So now we're at almost $9,000 for.
We just have hardware.
That's just amplification for the front stage. Yeah. When turn around and you can get an 8-channel JLVXI with DSP built in, putting out more wattage, at what's needed in terms of available, front stage for under $2,000, and you have a complete system just as speakers.
Oh, exactly. Just like you said, with the VXIs, the Helix V8s, the V12s, V18s, P6 Ultimate, name them. There's so many out there, and those are all-in-one systems that draw barely any current, barely any amperage. So, like, you don't got to change out battery, do anything.
Right.
Small footprint, don't overheat. If they do, blow on it for like 30 seconds and she's back on again. It's
let it roll, yeah.
Exactly. And it's like, man, like technology's advanced so far. Like, why are people still focusing on, hey, I need Class A?
And again, I don't think it's a prevalent thing. I think it's a high, it's like I lust after a 1991, GTI as well, but it's not something that most people are going to expect to want to drive every day. It's a Lamborghini Countach is a great example, right?
Yeah, like, that's a good one. Everyone's poster car.
Yeah, kick-ass car. Everybody would want one, but it's miserable to drive when it comes down. I mean, there are people out there that say they love it and it's their daily driver or whatever, but they're lying. So, you know what I mean? But it's the constant, there's the vocal minority, in my opinion, who have the barrage of, the back in the day when car audio, manufacturing was great. And it's like, maybe back in the day when car audio was more exclusive is what you're thinking. You know what I mean? Like, because the car audio that people of yours and mine age group that we could afford when we were teenagers was, pretty junk. Even if it was made by the same people that made the good stuff, the stuff at the entry level was pretty horrific. Whereas now, I mean, the Zapco Z series and stuff like that was the amp to have back then in the 90s and early 2000s even, and 90s more. But that in 90s dollars, that was $1,600.
Yeah. What's that
now?
Like
for a 2-channel amp. Yeah. Yeah, for a two channel 150 watt by 2 amp. And they were great, but it's one of those things where now you can build a whole system around a couple grand, and it very probably outperform that system built with that amp, those amps back then. I had them. I mean, I know, and I know my cars now far outperform the cars then with far less money.
And less space taken.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Well, and I think the big thing here that, to keep reiterating for people coming in is that, you don't have to do a dash build.
No.
You don't have to feel, inferior because you don't have XYZ product. I mean, Jeffrey Howell is up there with money rounds with VXI
100%.
amps. The NASCAR has VXI amps. John Cosby, who has the VXI amps. Like, I think there's a fair number of people within the community who would say those aren't, of the available options in that price range, those aren't the ones to use. And that's fine. There are other options out there, but of similar style in terms of pricing, in terms of amplification channels, in terms of having a DSP built in. I mean, it's not really a secret now to anybody, so I'm not releasing any proprietary information here with you, but like the car that we're doing for the tuner, the tuner challenge at SVR has the Arc Audio Blackbird in it, and that's again an all-in-one 8-channel amplifier with a DSP built into it that is very capable for well under $2,000.
Well under it, and
small.
Once again, yes, that's what I was about to say, and it's tiny, and it's like, man, it's why. And I don't want to continue beating a dead horse, but I saw a post, it was like a month ago, and it was a name I never saw. I think it was on Strictly Sound Quality, and it was like, what's better, Class D or Class AB? Most people, were commenting like, not this again, like use the search button. But then you just saw like 100 comments. Yeah, but then you saw so many comments be like, Class AB is superior, like it has to be that or nothing. And it's like, well, that's not true. Just like you said, like Jeffrey Hall's a great example. I mean, how many trophies does he have locked in his house right now?
More than his wife wants, I'm sure.
Yeah, right. And it's like, those are Class D amps, and that's a great
and they're not
figurehead to show.
And they're not terribly powerful either. I mean, I think there's this thought process that's prevailed for a long time. I think especially with Class D over time, of people that you have to have this giant, enormous amounts of power on tap to be competitive, and it doesn't hurt. But again,
never
I think it doesn't hurt. But I think it's one of those things where, that is a question I still get constantly. Is how much power do I need for this thing? How many watts is the speaker? Well, the speaker is 0 watts. The speaker will never. The speaker will always be 0 watts. Yeah. But there's this conception, and I think that just the numbers, it's like miles per hour. Well, if I got this 70 mile per hour amp and this 300 mile per hour amp, it's
what can
4
you drive
times
on the highway?
Faster. It's like, no, it's not. Your difference between going from a 70 watt amplifier to a 150 watt amplifier is going to be in terms of actual performance, is going to be barely noticeable. It's not.
Well, I think, Clifton, and I do want to circle back into like how new competitors like what I recommend doing, but like sure. let's keep that analogy. Like we have a Bugatti Chiron, 300 mile per hour car, and let's say we have a Honda Civic, right? They both can do 70 miles an hour. Right. One can do 300, but on the highway, what's the speed limit? 65.
Right.
And think of the competition as your speed limit. Most judges are not going to crank your system up to 110, 115 dB because 2 minutes, their ears are fried and they can't judge the next car. Mm-hmm. That's why people need to understand, like, for competition, and once again, like, quotations, competition, right. You're not going to get really above like what 90, 95, Clifton. Like, what do you think? Somewhere around there?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say some of the mecha competitions, at least back in the day, probably got louder than that. But I mean, Emma, Iasca, even the money round, is going to be in that 85 to 95 dB range.
Exactly,
tops.
and
because I mean, you can't. I mean, even especially at the bigger events, because I mean, the majority of the judges there are necessarily listening to 40 to 48 cars. So you can't spend 2 days judging that many cars at a high output. And, we've discussed on here with other people as well, but just the basics of human hearing, you're more inclined to pick up details and cues and everything else at a lower volume, not a higher volume.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's one of those things where for judging purposes, yeah, it's not as impressive to demo and go, ooh, get the ooh effect. But when it comes to separating good cars from, better cars, the lower levels are definitely where you're at, and you're not using that much power at that.
Exactly. And regardless, but let's go back to that analogy, so when you need power, and I'm not a good proponent, I don't think Jeffrey is either. Most top guys, Robert Boyd, another one, we're all running Class C. We all have a crap ton of power, like all of us. Yeah. I have 3 6-channel ARC series amps, and they're all bridged. So I'm putting 175 by 2. That's math. I'm close to 400 per speaker, and 2 my 3-way, crap ton of power. My tweeters, even at my loudest volume, may be getting 6 watts of power.
Right.
And it's like, people need to understand that, like, hey, when you apply a crossover, that is limiting the amount of power you're putting to that speaker.
Right.
What you're doing is essentially, you just have headroom. And this is why I mentioned before, like system design. How loud do you want to get? My car gets loud. That was the point of it. I wanted, in my opinion, once again, Miguel, for gray, I want it to be a true SQ car for me. It needs to be able to have dynamics and get loud, just like I would in a live event. A live event is not 80 dB. Correct. When they're cranking on it, they're cranking on it. And I want to sometimes experience that. Windows down, Tampa weather, when it actually cools down, it's actually nice. Right. I want to be able to roll my windows down and still listen to my music.
Right.
So that's the only reason, all new competitors, hear us out. That's the only reason you need more than the 75 watts. Mm-hmm. And even then, you can still get pretty loud with 75 watts. If you want to get louder, 1, make sure you get the proper speakers to do that and use proper crossovers. But 2, it's like, then you need the power. That's why you need the power. If not, stick with your 75 watts, get yourself a VXI, a Blackbird, a V8, V12, whatever, and just be happy. Call it a day.
Yep. Which again, I think as long as you're not, like you said, as long as you're not wanting to hammer on it or impress other people, because even then, you know how tiring it is giving demos when it comes to your own physique. Like it's not all that fun to listen to music that loud for that long. Like
it's really not. One of my favorite songs right now, and I demoed it to Mr. Harold, and he was like, I played the tricycle song, and I cranked on it. I mean, full tilt, and I made him jump. He was like, "This is a good demo track for this car." I was like, "Yeah, I know, I like it. Thanks, Clifton." I hit you up. He was like, "Yeah, actually, thank Larry." So thanks, Larry, appreciate it. But I like that song because it has that, like, when you click play, you're not immediately hit by something. It's a nice little, like, the piano comes in and you're chilling, and then dynamics come. And it's cool because if your car's dialed in, it doesn't really hurt you. But, like, you're wowed. I'm like, wow, like, that sounds real. That sounds fun. Some tracks, like, and this is why I can't do, like, Metallica. I can't do Scream Out. I can't do it. Sorry, Chris Pate. I don't know how you do it, bro. But, like, I just can't, like, to me, like, it just hurts my ears. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to turn that. That's a good 85 dB song. Not saying it's bad music. It's just, I can't crank on it. Circling back to what do I think people are spending money on that they shouldn't? Okay, let's start with amplifiers. We talked about that for like 20 minutes. Spending way too much money on speakers. Not saying they're not good, but like the Accutin, the Micro Precision, all this like $20,000 for speakers. I'm like, guys, these home towers, like my Revels, they don't use no $20,000 speakers, and they will blow every car out of the water. You don't need to have $20,000 speakers. I'm not saying cars that have more are bad. No, the opposite. That's great. I don't have a disposable income. But you don't need to have that.
Well, and it's even worse than the regret of everything when something blows, and then you're stuck with that life. It's like, ooh, not fun. Yeah. No,
and RCA cables and these DAPs and all these little.
Oh, the DAPs! Oh my gosh! Especially when it comes to competition. Everybody complains about how we put out, all these different playlists and everything else, but it's like, man, if we were living back in the day when I just put a CD in, and it's getting close now again with the USB input. If you want to, it's kind of like if you want to make everybody's life easier, if you're competing seriously and you want to do it right, have it to where we can use a USB input, have it to where we can read the tracks and change the tracks and volume easily. That's all.
And have the name on the track.
All you got to worry about it. Yeah. And obviously in the right order.
Yeah. Don't be like track 1, track 13, track 2. It's like, that doesn't help anyone. I don't know what this is. Right. But yeah, it's and I think
the majority of the people, I think the DAP, as far as the super high end, multiple $1,000 Astel and Kerns and stuff like that, like is starting to make its cycle now, kind of like the GS9 did back in the day, where
everyone had to have one.
Yeah, you went from everybody having it was within 6 months. We went from everybody having a CD player to 90% of everybody having a GS9, and then that cycled out, and now it's kind of the point where 90% are kind of doing what they need to head unit wise or source unit wise, but can take a USB input. So we're really close. It's just like if you're looking to go down the DAP route, please don't. Because you're not doing yourself any favors. You're going backwards in technology. Like, it's just not.
Especially with the people, like the DAP stands for digital audio player, right? And the whole point of it and the whole point of its existence is for headphones. They have built-in amplifiers and they have really high-end DACs, digital to analog converter. What blows my mind is when people will be using these very expensive, like Astel and Kern, and then going digital out. I'm like, guys, do you not understand the way this works? It's like you're using ones and zeros. You're not using that DAC inside of it. You're bypassing it. And it's like my iPhone does the same thing. An iPad does the same thing. Anything will do the same thing. It's just ones and zeros. As long as the clock sync up between that DAP, that iPhone, that iPad, that whatever you use, and your DSP, doesn't matter. It's going to sound the same. And I've had to prove that to some of the customers, and I'm like, here, let me plug my old 13 Pro in via Lightning, and I'll show you. I will just blind A and B, close your eyes, and I'll just switch through them. You tell me. Most of the times, honestly, they say my phone sounds better. I'm like, it doesn't, but like,
right.
It's just like,
well, it's in some reality, it does sound better to me because it's so much more simple and straightforward to use. A lot of times, like, I know that doesn't actually add up to sounding better, but when you're taking away distractions and pain points during the process, especially again when judges are going through 50 plus cars in a weekend, every little bit adds up when it comes to making things easier. And especially when it comes, we've mentioned before, and I'm going to mention it again, but especially when it comes to movement of the judge, like if your car is some of the more fine-tuned cars when it comes to things, it's more picky on judge position, and the judge will spend the time to find kind of that sweet spot. But every time that the judge has to move, they're going to be less inclined to find the sweet spot. So,
well, it also just takes away from the illusion.
Yeah, absolutely.
That you're no longer in a car. And that's kind of the whole point of car audio. At least to Miguel, which is like, hey, if you're going to be in a car and you're going to have a really good system, the whole point is to not feel like you're in the car anymore.
Right.
And if every single second, just to turn up the volume, you got to adjust your entire body or just, squint your eyes to see where the track's at. Right. I know back in the day, some of the old school guys were like, well, back in the day we had very small screens. Well, luckily we're in 2024. We don't have to have small screens, and
well, but even when we had small screens, at least I knew what track number it is easily on that screen because that's all it showed,
True.
I'm okay with a small screen if I can, I'm able to see exactly the information I'm after. But when I can't see the screen and, again, with a lot of these digital audio players, like you said, they're kind of meant to be a handheld device, obviously, with the headphones, and they're putting far too much information in a very small part of the area, and they're also trying to get album art and everything else on there, so your colors are constantly changing and everything else, So, compare that to like a Denon Z1 or something back in the day where you had this little tiny backlit LCD display. Like, yeah, but at least I could see the information I was after. And I knew it was going to be in the order that I had it because the CDs didn't randomly change the order that the tracks were in.
Right. And plus, typically, you guys had a little remote that you could just hold in your hand. Right. And once again, the illusion won't be broken. It's just sitting in your lap.
Right.
And for some guys, and I'm a great example, anyone who's ever demoed my car and an SVR, I want to overheat my amps. How many demos I'm giving? So guys, Come get a demo. Right. I have an iPad. I have a Mazda. No one makes a harness for my Mazda. Does not exist. Mazda just isn't that big, especially my CX-50. I think I'm the only person that has a CX has even done a build like this on it. So I have to use my iPad mini. I'm not going to use a full iPad Pro. That's just too obnoxious. But, I try to make it at least simple for the judges. And I have a nice little arm that kind of extends to you. The only, you do have to move your hand a little bit, but it's an iPad. Right. So it's clear. You can see it. And, I separated or Russ sent it out to separate the director from the volume knob. So the volume knob is you rest your fingers land right on the volume knob. Right. So you can close your eyes and you know exactly where it's at. Right. I try to make it easy. And that's kind of the whole point. It's let's keep the illusion that we're no longer in a car when you close your eyes. And a DAP is not one of those. Right. And there's just no point. It's just so expensive. With the $2,000, $3,000 you're spending on that and this, I don't know. Oh, yeah, it's ridiculous. Crazy $10,000 cable. Once again, I'm exaggerating. Right. But it's dude, you could have bought a whole system. And the one thing that I really want to tell people is, please, proper sound deadening. Mm-hmm. That is what separates a good car from an amazing car. So what do you think? What do you think as far as people that have done sound deadening? Yep. What do you think is the biggest factor that they're missing? Yeah. If they say, yes, I've sound deadened, and then you go, well, okay, but you didn't do this part that was most necessary to do. What is that key 100%. Bit for you? Oh, sorry? We're definitely going to go over an hour. I apologize, but we got to talk about this. Big thing is, let's squash it right now. CLD only is not sound deadening. And CLD is to kind of what people put to control resonance in the doors. The thing that people, has the butyl and the tin foil, and some of them are fancy, got the foam over it. But we're talking basically like the Dynamat Be Quiet style stuff that everybody's been using for years. Exactly. Dynamat, Stinger, Stinger stuff, Resonix stuff, all that. Yes, you need that. That is step one. What you have to take care of, especially what a lot of people do have the mid-bass in the doors, is that plastic door card. And a lot of people put so much time and effort into CLDing the metal part and then just be like, well, I'm just going to put this very rattly, flimsy plastic piece over it. I'm sound deadened. I'm like, no, you're not. And that is what breaks the illusion of the bass being up front, bass being, one with the rest of the soundstage. A lot of times, and it kind of is easier with, Smart and Max and, just being able to see phase. When you're in phase, you're in phase. It's pretty easy. Because now we have the technology to just visualize it. If you are still feeling it or be like, man, it's kind of rainbowing, do me a favor. Just lift your feet up. He's going to get an ab workout. And I bet you money all of a sudden it's no longer rainbowing. All of a sudden it's now nice and high like everything else. Tactile feel is a huge thing for humans. And that's kind of how we notice where things are at. And if you're feeling or hearing your bass coming from the floor, you're going to get that rainbow effect. Mm-hmm. So what do we do? So CLD, like we typically do, the Dynamat, the Stinger, the Resonix. But focus on that plastic door card. That's key. Every little plastic, plastic on metal or plastic on plastic, put some foam in there. But the one thing that Nick Wingate showed me last year at finals, which really took my car to the next level, which is non-hardening clay. That's an old school trick. Mm-hmm. And putting that on the door cards and adding mass to eliminate those resonances and those vibrations is huge. Mm-hmm. And the one test I feel like a lot of people, this is what I always tell my customers every time when they tell me, yes, I've sound deadened my car. I'm like, cool. Mute your tweets, mute your mids, mute your subs. Play pink noise, crank on it. Tell me if your doors are rattling now. Every single time, 10 out of 10. They're like, yeah, there's so many rounds in my doors. I'm like, yeah, those little nuances, your mind picks up. Sure, because you're able to that's what needs things. To be. Yeah. Exactly. I'm like, that's what needs to be treated. Stop spending money on speakers. Stop continually, I see so many people going from this brand to that brand to this brand of speakers and cables and amps. Yeah. And it's like, guys, your problem all along was just system design. It was just sound deadening. Spend your money properly there. For my non-hardening clay, I go to Lowe's, I get HVAC duct putty. That's good down to negative 30 all the way up to 200 degrees. It doesn't melt, stays in the same consistency, doesn't get hard. It's $6 a pound. Well, and the other part of that
when it comes to, especially after big shows like Aggieland or SVR, and you have people that are immediately tearing down, and I find out about it all because, obviously with the amount of time that goes into each one of these shows and the amount of time that everybody has to actually be able to do that, it's like right now, I'm already well into Aggieland 2025 plans.
Of course.
It's one of those things where if we don't start the day after the last year, it won't get done. So it pretty much, it's pretty much, okay, who's in for next year?
Exactly. I'm already signed up.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not missing it this year.
Well, and that's the other part. It's like, well, here's your chance. And, and I would prefer to see a lot of new faces every show. I mean, it's one of those things where I don't want to see the same old, keep giving money to the same old people.
Yeah.
But my point is like, it's easy for people to make those commitments further down the road because they assume they'll be done. But then, they get, there's several people that, were at Aggieland who then decided to tear down between Aggieland and SVR, who are now not going to SVR because they're not done from their teardown from Aggieland. And it's like, but, again, the people out there that you might be shooting for, and I'm going to call out Jeffrey again, and I hate to call his name out again, but I mean, he hasn't changed that build for years.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
he's
the very first time, Clifton, and thanks Jeffrey for doing this, which is the very, very first year I ever went to any show ever in my life was Lone Star 21. Look at that, right? Right? It's like,
5 billion people.
It's so many, so hot. I don't know what's going on. I don't know anything. I don't know anyone. And I
was running the show and I didn't know what was going on, so we're together.
I just see people like randomly getting food. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess food's here. I'm like, do I pay for this? And no one answers me. I'm like, okay, I don't know what's happening. But
okay,
not many people. Right.
Honestly, I'll tell you a real quick side note on that show. So when we first started preparing for that show, I went into that show with plans of hoping that we'd have 30 people there. We would have 30 people there. For the first 4 to 6 months of planning on that show, before we ever announced anybody that we were doing it or anything was public at all, it was, we're going to shoot for 30 people to be there, and these are the plans we're going to do around, because that's where like the whole top 20 and everything else went in. Yeah. We figured we'd be shedding 10 people. So it was like, okay, no big deal. And when it came to like co-joining all the orgs together and using the math formulas that we were and everything else, like all of that preparation, hey, everybody gets free food, like what you were saying, having the food trucks there and everything else, like all of those plans were based on hopefully 30 people show up to make it work out, and we'll just have to cover the difference.
Clifton, how many people showed up? It was like what, 80?
We had 70. We had 72 competitors and over 150 people. And
ridiculous.
12 vendors, I think. So I mean, it was one of those things where, and all of that happened, because again, we were working on making sure that we could do everything up until kind of the last minute, because we were still dealing with COVID and everything else, as far as the regulations and people who was actually allowed to be there and how we were going to do it and everything else. So, I mean, from the time that we were hoping for 30 people to the time that we had 72 people registered, that all ballooned within a week and a half.
Wow.
So it was one of those things where there was really no time or ability. Again, these events, we work at, it takes over a year to put one of these events together. And, when we were already like a month or two away from the event, when we actually put out registration for it, and then almost immediately we get over double the amount of people we were hoping for. So yeah, none of that was planned. So yeah, I just continue to apologize for that show to people, because it was just like, I mean, it was awesome, but it caught everybody off guard for sure.
Well, I was, I want to apologize to you now, even though you didn't know me then, I didn't know you. I was definitely part of the problem because I just showed up. because I didn't know anything. I'm like, hey, I have this car. Reddit says to tune it flat. It's tuned flat. The RTA is happy. Can I compete? Right. And I remember, like, I actually, I think I talked to you. I was like, hey, how do I sign up? And you were like, you were like, yeah, I think you said something like, for what org? I was like, I don't know. Because, like, I didn't even know there were different orgs or anything. I was like, I don't know what's going on. This is my first show. And Reddit told me to tune it flat. So I listened to Reddit. Of course, I probably got dead last. I don't remember what I got.
Me either.
But, you know, that was the first time I actually got to hear some really cool cars. And one of them was Jeffrey's, you know. I was like, hey, you have a Mavs. They kind of listen to it. I have the same car. Right. And it was like, I had a 15, he had a 16. Mine was black, his was white. And he let me listen. I was like blown away. I was like, wow, dude, like this is crazy. You know, and it's crazy how like that's the same car. And now we're in 2024. And it's like, guys, that's kind of what you need to do. Same thing with Robert Boyd and, you know, Brian Milch's old Cadillac, you know, it's, and I keep referring to these names just because, you know, they're friends of mine, but it's like those cars I've seen from the very first time I ever even went to a show, and they're the same cars. I mean, of course, they've like, you know, done a couple things here and there, but for the majority, I'm like, you know, you can look back in pictures, it's the same car.
Look at NASCAR.
You know? Right. I mean, you know,
even after a rebuild, it's still, of course, that, you know, things are a little more flexible behind the panels on that car, but I mean, it's still like fundamentally a refresh. It's not a rebuild. You know what I mean?
Correct.
It's you get things, and you can look at. I think part of the problem is that people want to be too original.
Yeah.
They're like, look, I was the first. It's like,
yeah.
You look at so many things when it comes to design, loudspeakers for home, for example, like the basics are all still pretty much the same. Keyboards for a computer, handlebars on a bicycle. Like, again, you can make some iterations to it, but you're not an iPhone designer here. And even there, I mean, yeah, we had a lot of progression initially, but now it's iteration over the years. Like you take, or the iPod is even a better example. Like the iPod didn't, you know, from version to version, didn't feel like it was changing that much. But you look at the first iPod compared to the last iPod, and they're hardly recognizable. You know,
I mean, Clifton, look at the Porsche 911.
I mean, great example.
You know, yes. That car is just, I mean, even now, I think they just came out with a refresh. And I'm like, dude, that's the same car from 2008.
But you look at original 911 compared to modern day 911, and they're completely different, you know?
Exactly.
It's like, yes, it's the fundamental design tenets are there, but over, you know, again, it's just, you take it step by step versus trying to reinvent the wheel every time. Like and there's no guarantee. Every time, then you're going in with no data. Every time you do a rebuild, you're going in with no data. Like, and you can, like what you're saying with speakers and that kind of thing. Like, you can take a I'm going to say a entry level in my mind, but you know, what would be a mid level speaker for most people in a front stage in the, let's say $600 to $1,000 range, right?
Yeah.
You know, you can take that a long way. And maybe never have to do anything to it, but start there, and then when you've exhausted everything else, you might be able to get another 5% by going to that next level thing. But that isn't I think my biggest pet peeve when it's why I'm very particular on the people I use for judging. It's very particular on the people I surround myself with and everything else, because everybody that's involved is involved in the industry in some way, right? You're not going to get away from that, because, you know, it's what I've said from the beginning. It's like, if you eliminate all the bias, you are left with incompetence, because the people who know what they're doing the best have bias necessarily. That's what you're buying in this process, is their bias. And when I say
that's
bias,
what an opinion is.
Yeah. And when I say bias, I don't mean for something. You know, I don't mean because you use XYZ brand, they're going to give you more points or anything else. You know, obviously people are going to be more inclined to certain tuning or whatever else when it comes down to it, and that's going to happen. But also these days, everybody can achieve pretty similar results when it comes to that. So it's not like there's a super secret, you know, knock there. I have seen very little equipment level bias, and when it does come across, those people are promptly discarded. But what irks me even more than that is when people use their position to sell equipment based on their
to
opinion.
Influence.
Right. So then it's, listen to your car. Well, if you use this speaker or you use this, product or you use this thing, even if that is lending credibility to my products, I'm still don't like it. Like it's still,
Yeah. 100%, Cliff. Yes.
And very few times is that actually the answer. And when it comes to equipment these days, overall, in my opinion, any of the brands that are involved and have been involved over the past decade or more are all competent at doing the job. It's a matter of, but the problem is that there's a couple problems there in my opinion. One is that people don't actually develop enough time and experience or don't rely on others who have the time and experience with that product to maximize it.
Or they rely too much on other people and not enough on themselves.
Right. Yeah.
I've seen that. And I was at fault of that last year. I had new competitor and a lot of people were in my ear telling me what to do left and right, especially in the beginning. By the time finals were around, I wasn't listening to anyone but me. Did well. But at the end of the day, that car wasn't what I wanted.
Right.
That build wasn't. And this build is. This build from the ground up is, thank you, Russ, for building it. But that is my system design. Right. I designed that system ground up to do what I wanted to do. And I'm happy it does. Steve Cook, he helped me out with the tweeter positioning. I went over there to him. He actually built the A-pillars for him.
Oh, nice.
But I knew I wanted, some kind of, I wanted reflection control, which beforehand I didn't have with the tweeters. And I wanted to fix that. And plus I wanted the piccolos in there. So, it kind of just worked out that, I was there at Cook and he was like, hey, I'll do it. I'm like, perfect. This is the end. Like this is the end of the build for Gray. One, Bree's tired of me spending money. It does everything I need to do with my Morels and my ARC amps. And yes, I have a Brax DSP. You do not need a Brax DSP, everyone. Everyone's asked me that. Like, how do you love it? I do like it. It's cool to have. It is not needed. And a good testament to what you're saying, Clifton, is, you can go ARC Audio RS, and this is Miguel's opinion. This is Miguel's bias. I think it's the best bang for your buck speaker you can possibly buy on the market. Miguel's opinion only. I think it's very affordable, and you see the top guys winning with that speaker. And it's a very smooth, warm driver, and it's tiny, and you can put it in OEM locations, which is great. And you don't have to empty your pockets completely. Your wife will not divorce you to buy ARC Audio RS. But that doesn't mean it stops there. But that's a great testament to be like, hey, if Brian Mitchell can take that same speaker and win every damn time, that tells you that most people, if you're okay with that sound and that volume and what it gives you, you would never need a change. It would then come down to system design, sound deadening, and tuning. And too many people don't spend enough time on that. And that's what I was talking about, Clifton, in the beginning, full circle, which is too many new competitors spend their money on the wrong thing, which is equipment. They're just always chasing new equipment. But they're putting in the same spot that it was beforehand. I'm like, guys, the problem is the location. The problem is the sound deadening. It's not the speaker. It's not the driver.
Yeah. Well, and I would say maybe even a better, maybe a more broad term on sound deadening, just as far as acoustic control of the vehicle, right? Like,
Sure.
you're because, when you're doing home audio, for example, well, I would say even, in my opinion, like near field studio type speakers are probably kind of the easiest to set up somewhere and have great results on. Like I have a pair of the Cali LP6s that
Nice.
Aaron Hardison recommends. And I've had much nicer. I mean, like I've had Dyne Audios, I've had this, I've had that. But man, those things, $400 for a pair, and you can put them quite possibly anywhere, in a near field listening scenario, and they will undoubtedly sound better than any car you've been in. They're they're active, they're self-amplified, like you plug them in, you hit the dip switches for where they're placed, and you listen, and you're done. And
just have fun and enjoy.
Yeah. When you get into home audio, even if, like in my example, my office is in my living room essentially. So my office is up against one wall, and then 20 feet the other direction is my TV and my home audio and my home entertainment system, right? So all I have to do is kind of turn around, but it's two completely different scenarios. Like in this case, I'm 3 feet away from the speaker. In that case, now you're 9 feet, 12 feet away from the speaker. So you have a whole lot more of the environment as part of the sound. You have it's far less directional. You have a lot going on in that regard that makes it much more difficult to control the environment without controlling the environment artificially, which most of us can't do because our wives don't like acoustic panels hanging from the ceiling and bass traps in the corners, and
Exactly.
So but a car, you have the added fun factor of the fact that
car.
At least and at least in a house, the loudspeaker is already designed for the driver plus the enclosure.
Correct.
In a car, your car is the enclosure and the environment, and you're just adding things in there.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's one of those things where you're never able and simply sealing the speaker in a door or whatever obviously isn't the answer either in many of these cases.
No.
So you have all the reflections in a small area. You're not really in a near field listening position like a studio, but you're not in any kind of natural acoustic situation either. So
in a car field. Yeah. Welcome to it.
and our whole goal when we get in that field is I feel like the car is the one place where we do our best to get away from the environment we're actually in.
Spot on. Yes.
Because like when we're in when you're in a studio, you go, oh, I'm in a studio and this is what it sounds like. And when you're in a house, you're like, oh, I'm in a house. That's what it sounds like. And then you get in an orchestra setting and you're like, oh, I'm in a Philharmonic theater. And this is what it sounds like. And then you get a car and you go, I want my car to sound like a Philharmonic theater and a studio session and my home audio system. And you're like, what the fuck, man? Like, why? Like, I get it. But at the same time, like, we work so freaking hard to get away from the environment we're actually in, where we don't do that in any other place. You don't get in a studio and go, oh, I want this to sound like a theater. You don't go sit down in your house and go, oh, I want this to sound just like a studio. Like, but we do that in a car.
We want so much from a car. We want the bass to be up front, but hey, we also want 215s in the back or 18s or whatever. But we don't want any inkling of it, and it needs to be drivable, and you need to put stuff in it. And I don't want I don't want tumor pods up on the A-pillar. I don't want any of this. I want it to all be hidden. Go. It's like, really?
Right. Right. Like,
it's like, well,
I mean, I appreciate the challenge. I do. But at the same time, it's like, chill, man. Like, why are we fighting about the fact that we're in a car? Like, let's just be okay with that and roll with the punches a little bit there.
Well,
but
rolling with that, because and then the other thing that us competitors, we're crazy. I swear. On top of all that complexity, then we say, and we want other people that have never heard this car to get in and tell me what they think about it. I'm like, what? No one does that at a studio or your home or anywhere. Like, that's for you. You enjoy it. Right. And it's like, and then people make drastic changes to their car to appease someone else.
Right. Well, and I think that's where, I mean, for those that were at Aggieland, the judges' shirts had coach written on them instead of judge.
Yeah, that's nice. I like that.
That's been my mantra since the beginning has been, we're not going to get away from the competition scenario, because that seems to be what really, it's kind of like the reasoning people come together for these things. And it's just maybe because it's been done that way or whatever. I mean, and there's tons of competition in the world, and there's competition in the world that makes sense and some that doesn't, and some that's in between. And there's no reason to sit here and ironically judge competition for what it is or isn't. It is what it is. But I think primarily the shift has, the focus has shifted for the majority of competitors from purely wanting to win into knowing what they can do to get better. And, that's where my focus has always been. And I'm not sitting here I'm just saying because I'm involved in the bigger shows, the goal has been to go along with what that desire is and provide the most amount of data and feedback that we can for the competitors along the way, and also give, kind of meet everybody where their needs are as much as possible within the constraints, where, if you're there to win and you have a winning vehicle, then good day, sir. I hope we provide the format to do that as fairly and competently as possible. And also, if you're 30th in the pack, I am confident that you went away with more information than what you came with. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And at very least, it's one of those things. And that's where I have shifted myself into what interests me most with the multi-judge format, with the invitationals, with that. Not because of, again, not necessarily because of figuring out who wins. I really, I've said it all along, I really, once everything's handed out, it's hard for me to remember who won the last show. I really don't care. Yeah. But my goal through that is always to be able to provide people a basis to have the feedback to be able to move themselves and their system forward if they choose.
100%.
Because, it's one of those things where going to a, we'll use a defunct organization, USAC show. I'm sorry to those who might be offended when I say that, but, okay, I go to this USAC show and this one guy is there and he gave me feedback, and, to me, who the freak cares? Like,
yeah.
Even if that person is really competent, even if that person is one of the people that I regularly use as a judge, I still, it's one person's opinion. If you tune your car to a judge's feedback, that judge is essentially tuning your car in proxy.
Exactly.
Whereas in an event where, if coming into SVR, if you choose to do everything, I mean, you're getting 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, up to 11, 12 judges in a weekend.
Yeah. All different shapes, sizes. Right. I mean, I'm a big boy, Clifton. Like I'm 5'10", 5'11" on a good day, 280 pounds. Like most people don't have the body I have. And it's like the car probably sounds different to, let's say, Mick Wallace, where he's a lot skinnier than I am. Right. And it's like, I wonder what he thinks of it. He liked it, but it's like, who knows? Like your body also plays a part into the car.
And not only that,
that's
but
another hard part.
But primarily being able to have the look at the consistency of feedback. Even if you don't do anything but the invitational, now you've got 6 exact scoring methods.
Yeah.
As far as the score sheet goes, with 6 competent people giving you feedback, and if one guy tells you to burn it and it's the worst thing you ever heard and everything else, you can take that or leave it. But if 4 people all tell you that, hey, your mid-range is hot, then maybe you need to look at it, and maybe you will make a more enjoyable system for yourself that you didn't know you needed before you did it.
Exactly.
I mean, how many times as you tuning, to shift us back on what you do, how many times with you tuning would somebody, let's say you were going to go into somebody who wasn't necessarily asking for a tune, but you went in to do it. I mean, I think you can say with reasonable confidence, and I would put, any other major tuner with experience in this mix, that somebody can sit there and say, my car is great. I love my car. And, it may not win competitions, or it does win competitions, but, it is the bee's knees. And then, you retune it and they go, oh, I didn't know it could sound like that.
Yeah, it can get better.
How many times does that happen? So
every time. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like, just because you're competent, just because of this or that, doesn't mean that other, you are probably overlooking what you're hearing that somebody else is going to pick up within seconds. Just because
instantly, because it's not their car. You don't have that bias. Circling back to biases, when you tune, especially like this is why I had Bree, and she's harsh on me and on my car. Gray, oh Lord, like Clifton, let me just say, when I first started this, she would be like, actually call me when it sounds good, and she would just leave. I was like, okay. I just spent like 2 days tuning it. I was like, man, right. Luckily now she gets in and she's like, yeah, this is it. She's happy. I'm like, okay, cool. But like, whomever says that they're a tuner, and to every tuner out there, listen, you can always get better. And this is all speaking for myself. And always have other people helping will always make a car better. I mean, if I can have every tuner, every judge in my car giving me feedback and like helping me get my car better, I will open the doors in a heartbeat.
Absolutely.
I will do it. Let's have fun. I will never say, yes, is this car on me? Yeah, this is a testament of what I can do in WaveForm, and this is what I enjoy. This is my car now is what Miguel thinks is good sound quality for Miguel.
Right.
Has it been doing well? Yes, it has. But even if it hasn't, I'm enjoying my car. And every day I hop in it, it puts a smile on my face. Yep. That's the whole point of this. And I do want to clarify, when I say like, I don't care for competition, I don't care for it for the young competitors that are coming in like I once was, where it's like, man, how do I even compete with the same guy who's been winning for the past 30 years? Right. Exaggerating again, and now, looking at it, it's like, well, we don't have to. If we all just look at it as new and old competitors, like, hey, this is a place just to have fun, and also we get the benefit that we do compete, that's a win-win.
Yep. And
hopefully it doesn't offend anyone, but last year at finals, I didn't feel like there was a lot of camaraderie there. Mm-hmm. It was very quiet, and it was just like everyone was just sitting next to the car, just waiting for the judge to judge. Mm-hmm. And then we felt, at least to me, it felt like then everyone just left, and that was the end of the show. I was like, huh. And then, I'll look at pictures, and people over here, like Steve had over here having a grill with speakers in it, going crazy. And it's like, what happened to that? What happened to like Spring Break Nationals? Like, what happened to that? Like, what happened to when everyone was just having fun? Not
to be biased, but I think Aggieland is very much that.
Yeah, for sure, 100%.
I think, and that's where, I even against SVR, as far as having the whole meal deal for like everybody involved and just being a great event and good time and everything else, I've been to every event in the world, obviously, but I've been to a lot of events in the world, or not just in the U.S. And I would say Aggieland is up there as one of the best events in the world. Period.
Yeah, I've been to one of them.
And so I think we're close there on SVR. SVR is just more competitive, I feel like, to a certain degree. I don't mean that as the people that Aggieland aren't competitive. I just mean I think the competition face is on more at SVR, and it's more like finals in that regard, where people are a little more closed and fierce. And I think maybe indoor versus outdoor has something to do with that. And it's why I haven't really overly been pushy on, doing things all indoors, because I kind of like the way Aggieland is as far as that goes, where, we pull the vehicles in to judge, but then they get pulled back out. It makes it to where outside is a party and inside is business.
Yeah, I like that. That's fun.
And whereas like SVR and finals, everything being done indoors is nice and convenient and comfortable, but that comfort level is kind of what takes that away. You brought up Spring Break Nationals, like, especially back in the day. When there was hundreds of cars there, you had the convention center up front that was, for the demo cars and the manufacturer booths and everything else.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much where your spectators stopped. The actual competition was out back in the field. And, all the competitors were back there. There was very little crossover between what was happening in the convention center and what was happening with the competition. But, with the competitors all being out back, essentially, it was also a big party. And, that wouldn't happen when you put the public face together with the competition. So yeah, I think a lot of people who are like, oh, we want all the manufacturers and we want this and we want that. Maybe they do. I don't know. I don't see that actually makes competition any better, or I'm not saying it makes it worse. I'm just saying it's a lot of money for people to put out, and I don't think the competitors would actually see the benefit, large scale benefit there.
Yeah. Like to me, like, I mean, I've truly, in my opinion, only been competing since last year, August. And then by the time Mecca finals in December, my car went back to Russ and it got reworked. And I just got my car back in June. So Gainesville was my first show. So I've been to, I don't know, maybe 12 shows in total.
Right.
And the most fun shows I have is a lot of times is like the smaller shows. Not saying finals wasn't fun,
no,
you know, but like when I could just get like, not trying to shoot the crap. Everyone knows what I'm trying to say. You know, and just have fun, crank on the volume. We're all just chilling, you know, making jokes like, man, your car sounds like crap. You know, when we all know like the car sounds great or whatnot, like that's when it's fun. But when everyone's like all stiff and it's like, yeah, don't talk to me because the judge might be coming in the next 2 hours. It's like, okay, dude, sure, whatever you say. Like,
right.
And that's why for me, my car, it's open for demos. If a judge is not in there right then and there, come on, let's have fun.
Right.
Because I didn't get that when I first started. And I want to be that change for all the new competitors or not that want to see, hey, what can Miguel do? What is WaveForm about? What's this car about? I'm going to demo. Have fun. You know, I have IB mid bass and IB sub. So, you know, indoors, I can't crank on it. But we can at least have fun and talk about audio. You know, we're a very small clique, if you will. There's not many of us out there doing this. So it's like, why not all just have fun and be able to compete? You know, I'm a very competitive person. Don't get me wrong. I want to win. I built my car to also be good for me and to win. But it's like, if I don't win, I'd much rather have had fun and not win than have zero fun and talk to no one and get a trophy. That's Miguel's opinion on it. I just want to have fun.
I agree. I think that's a good place to wrap up.
Yeah, 100%.
Go get demos of Miguel's and others, obviously. I think, you know, getting that crossover of here. If you're a very competitive person, you can call it recon. But keep in mind, you know, I think last thing I'll say, and we'll wrap up. But one thing to keep in mind is that a demo and competition experience, as far as, you know, how things are judged, are two very different things. A vehicle that can demo very well versus a vehicle that you think didn't sound as good or didn't demo as well has very little relevance on how things line up in the competition world.
100%. And Clifton, can I say one last thing to that?
Absolutely.
For a lot of people who are just spectating new competitors or people who just want to like because I've heard that a lot, which is like, man, but that car sounded better when he demoed to me. A lot of people don't know how to listen and they don't know what good is, if you will, for true sound quality. So learning those things and trying to train your ear for what these judges have been doing this for. I mean, Clifton, how many years do we have combined in the judges? I mean, we're 200 years in experience.
Massive, yeah.
You know, these, you know, women and men that are doing this, they know what they're listening for.
Right.
And when we're demoing, we're just having fun. I'm not putting in the right placement. I'm not moving my seat. I'm not putting a pillow under your butt. I'm not doing any of that. I say, hey, dude, what do you want to listen to? I don't care. You know, and we're just going to have fun with it. Right. With the judge, that's not happening. I'm a lot more stiff. I'm a lot more like, put your head here and don't move. I see you move, I'm opening the door. Now I'm playing. But like, It's like a lot more stiff when a demo doesn't happen. So, you know, I've heard it before and a lot of chatter. And I think it was Bruce Miller, I believe, that mentioned it yesterday. With like, hey, like, let's actually have fun SVR and let's not have a whole bunch of, you know,
trash talk,
banter and talking, you know, the next day or whatever, talking about, oh, this judge and just sucks. Like, there's just no need for that. You know, we're all just going to have fun. And if you didn't win this time, guess what? It's still SVR. I mean, finals afterwards. It's Aggie after that. You know, like, let's all just have fun.
Yeah, man.
All right. Now I'm done talking.
Nope. I'm down. I appreciate your time.
Of course. Thanks, Clifton. Thanks for having me again.
How about the ones we especially like?
Which ones?
You know, the ones with the cars that go.
I hear you. Hit it.